What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So the other day, Nintendo did release an update for the Nintendo Switch with more games going into their online service. This, though, being the basic tier, and it's once again brought up the question of how valuable this has become over time with the number of games that are piling up. We'll take a look at all of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Sony actually attending an event for once, since we always seem to talk about them skipping out on things like Gamescom. No, this time they'll be there, and I think it actually makes sense with the timeline that I'm envisioning for them to close out 2024. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members of the channel do get Newswave early. If you'd like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're gonna start today with Netflix and Horizon Zero Dawn. As we know, there was a series that was in development that would bring the Horizon franchise to the streaming platform. But now, based on a new report, seems like that's not happening. We can see this is over on Rolling Stone, who had the report saying that Netflix announced in 2022 that Blackman would spearhead the adaptation of the popular video game Horizon Zero Dawn and create the original outer space thriller series Orbital as part of that deal. Rolling Stone has learned that the two projects are no longer moving forward. They did have a representative for Blackman apparently putting out some sort of statement, but it was pretty basic. There wasn't anything new there, just a long, ongoing, and close working relationship with Netflix, and they continue to work on new projects. But it's just strange because Horizon right now is getting a massive push from Sony. It's very clear they want this to become like this massive intellectual property just outside of gaming. And while there are a lot of games seemingly in development, some we know about now with weird ones even like the Lego crossover, others that are still in development, even targeting things like cell phones. But you figure they would want to have series or movies even also break out and try to introduce it to a wider audience. So strange news here. Again, this is a report that necessarily hasn't been confirmed by Netflix or Sony, but it does seem, just based on the representative comments for Blackman, that it actually is true. And it does make me wonder if maybe Sony is pivoting, creative differences, other things behind the scenes that could have happened here, and maybe they just go in the direction of a full-on movie for it. But at this time, at least that Netflix series does not seem to be something that is going to materialize anytime soon. Also, big news for PSX owners, the dozens of you out there. It does appear that the modding scene has now shifted their attention to this PS2 DVR that Sony released back in 2003 and then promptly discontinued like 2 years later. But it's a very interesting device. There's one problem. The hard drive is locked to the system, and if it dies, then that's kind of it. The system can't work beyond that since it relies on the hard drive, and there's no way to replace it at this time. I say at this time because now there's a pretty big movement here within the modding community to reverse engineer, at least figure out the encryption. We can see this posted up over on Twitter X. This is from Malenko, who says, our favorite professional data recovery engineer, SkyHDD, has joined the efforts to understand the PSX drive firmware and break open the encryption. So this is exciting because it says this guy was previously used her experience to help the Xbox community with methods to safely and more easily unlock stock console hard drives for data preservation, which has become significantly better on the Xbox side from even back in the day when you do all kinds of craziness to unlock that Xbox hard drive. It's leagues better than what it was then. It's much easier. So this is good news, obviously, for just PSX owners for preservation, but also maybe upgrades. Maybe you could change out the 160 gig or 250 gigabyte 20-year-old hard drive, put an SSD in there, or just a new hard drive in general to keep that system running. So interesting stuff. We'll have to keep an eye out here to see what they're able to accomplish when it comes to that drive firmware. Oh, and we did get a sales update for Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. We can see this was posted up over on their official account, saying over 8 million of you have shown your support for Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. I mean, the game has been on sale multiple times. It's been pretty cheap. It's been on all different platforms, and 8 million is still very, very good and shows the strength of the Dragon Ball IP in gaming. And it does also make me think that they will try another single-player action-adventure RPG like Kakarot. I just wouldn't mind them maybe spending a bit more time and maybe budget on developing the thing. The game itself, I didn't think was bad. It just wasn't great necessarily. So I think this is at least a step in the right direction for them. And clearly the sales and the money is there on the other side. So maybe when they're done making downloadable content for it, which they have done constantly for years now, they can move on to the next thing outside of Sparking Zero and come up with another, hopefully better, single-player action-adventure RPG, we'll see. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Tokyo Game Show, as it does look like Sony will indeed be attending the show. They'll have their own booth, it'll be set up on the floor, and we assume there will have been some sort of presentation ahead of time to introduce all kinds of new games, first party and third party. And there's also one other little wrinkle thrown in there that I think could also be shown just ahead of the event. But we can see this is over on Gamatsu. This is all announced as well through Famitsu and stuff. And they say as of July 4th, 731 exhibitors, including 448 from Japan and 283 from overseas, will be participating in Tokyo Game Show 2024. It even says it'll be held on the largest ever scale and will host a total of 3,190 exhibition booths, exceeding last year's record in Tokyo Game Show history. And I mean, the list is pretty serious. There's a lot of different companies, publishers, developers showing up. The ones you'd expect are there: Bandai Namco, Capcom, Square Enix, Nintendo's there, but interesting enough for them, they are there specifically in the meeting area, so it doesn't list them as in the general exhibition area, but it does list Sony Interactive Entertainment as being in that section, so seems like they'll have a booth of some kind there. And this is notable because Sony has not done this in 5 years. This is the first time since 2019 that they would be there in person with a booth and potentially some sort of show ahead of it. Now, Sony would still do shows and try to line it up with this event, this happening at the end of September, so in this case, 28th, 29th. They'll do that event so that third parties that they're working with, partners, can announce games on a wide scale and then showcase them here and, of course, talk to different other exhibitors and vendors and partners and stuff and just advertise it in general. But here, okay, the 28th and the 29th of September does kind of line up with a few things that Sony would have planned. So, for example, if they did a state of play for Tokyo Game Show, yes, they would showcase third-party games that would partner with the PlayStation brand, but also they could line up some first-party stuff here. Like, for example, maybe Sucker Punch is ready to show off the successor to Ghost of Tsushima, and I think that would fit in well there. And, of course, they could have a nice spot here set up with the PlayStation at Tokyo Game Show. They could also have their PlayStation 5 Pro, and I kind of feel like they would try to launch the PS5 Pro end of October, first half of November. So this being at the end of September, it would put them less than 2 months away, probably honestly, maybe even a month away from the release of the console. And that is something you feel like you would want to show off in person alongside of a bunch of new games that could be set up for the holiday season even. I mean, this is after even Astrobots come out. Concord, right? So there would be, you assume, like a fresh slate of games that they would be showcasing here alongside of the potential for a new system, maybe new accessories. It's definitely caught people's attention that Sony is actually attending something. And it's funny because that wouldn't have been news years ago. It's like, well, yeah, of course Sony's going to be at Tokyo Game Show. They'll all be there. But now it is. It also seems that Microsoft won't be at Tokyo Game Show, so bit of a switch up there from what we've actually been expecting over the years, and Microsoft having a big Gamescom, maybe they just don't have a lot to show for the Japanese audience in September, but at least we can look forward to Sony then kind of taking their place and wonder what exactly they feel the need to show up for after 5 years. Next up, let's talk about Nintendo's surprise announcement for Nintendo Switch Online. That being a bunch of original Nintendo games that went into the service immediately. And I actually don't mind this where they just say, hey, these games are just out now. Like, you don't have to wait for them, where sometimes they say, oh, these Nintendo 64 games will be going in next week. In this case, no, they're just there. Go ahead and turn it on your Switch and it'll update and boom, you have 7 new original Nintendo games, which that's seemed like a lot. When I saw the list, I was like, wow, that's actually quite a bit of content to just drop in. But let's take a look at the list here. Starting at the top, we have Urban Champion. We have Golf, which Golf was like an Easter egg in a game for a while on NSO, and then they took it out because people, of course, like did a data mine on it and found it and stuff. It's supposed to be kind of a quiet acknowledgement, we'll say, to the late Iwata. Then we have a Donkey Kong Jr. Math. All right, Mock Rider, which Mock Rider's still a pretty fun game. If you've never played it, I think it's worth firing up and trying out a bit there. It's easy to jump into and stuff. So definitely interesting kind of NES game for what you consider we had back then. It just has a different perspective, and it's actually pretty fast. We have The Mystery of Atlantis, Solar Jetman, and then Cobra Triangle. So it's a nice variety of original Nintendo games in there. Again, 7 of them total, and I was thinking about this, that feels like a lot to just go in, and then I went and looked at how many original Nintendo games there are right now on the basic $20 tier. Over on Nintendo Life, they have an entire page where they've just added all these up, and these games are updated in that list. They currently have it set at 78 games in the NES games library, and that's not including maybe any games that are specific to the Japanese region, the Japanese app, as well as NES SP versions, right? So those are like their ROM hack save state things that they'll do where they'll kind of play around with the game a bit, increase difficulty, or they'll add some different abilities and stuff right out of the gate. And then you also have the Super Nintendo section that's 63 games in that. And then the Game Boy section that has 29. And this is all on the $20 a year service. It does feel like Nintendo has packed quite a bit of content, a ton of games in that library, which I will admit does make me think that they're going to raise the price for it, because that is almost an overwhelming amount of content to just get after paying $20 for the year. And they still have online service or just online play tied to it. I don't even necessarily think you need that as much anymore, just because of the number of games. And I know they're ROM files, I get it. But there are many people who don't want to deal with emulators and they just want it to work on their Switch, and that's it. They hit a button, the application opens, and they have all kinds of cool box art they can pick and then just jump right into the game. But overall, not a bad update for the service. 7 NES games going in, and I do wonder how much further they're going to push this thing before they start talking about that price point again, because it almost makes me wonder if a jump from $20 to $30 is inevitable with all the stuff they're putting in there now. And of course, how will they treat the transition from the Switch to their next system with NSO there in the middle? I assume it's just going to move over completely. You sign in on the new system, download whatever effectively, yes, again, ROMs and emulators, but Nintendo does some weird stuff, so we'll see exactly how that one plays out. Next up, let's talk about what ended up being a pretty funny eBay listing, and one that I have to give them an A+ for creativity, but also realize that it's not really going to do much because Sony will still find them. In fact, we can take a look at the eBay listing here. That's right. It's a Pizza Station 5 development pizza kit. Yes, this is an actual listing on eBay. Person, we can see Console Variations took the screenshot, posted it up over on Twitter X, and yeah, they apparently dressed it up as a pizza station. I guess it makes pizza. If you look at where it is, I guess it's right around the part of the system that would at least get warm. I don't think it's going to get hot enough to melt the cheese on the pizza necessarily, but yeah, you could dress it up like it's a little bit. People did this with all these different systems where the Xbox Series fridge, I mean, Microsoft ran with that one, so they at least played into it. We had the PlayStation 5 as a space station. It was a vacuum cleaner at one point. It's a router, so why not? It's a pizza station. Now, this particular station went for over 6,000 euros, so somebody saw some value in it, and obviously it's a PlayStation 5 dev kit, and they did the thing where they took the fake nose, mustache, and glasses and put it on the PS5 dev kit. My only thing with this, though, is the way these work is they do call back to the server. These different studios are assigned specific MAC addresses for these development kits. When you do sign in or connect to the internet, it's able to call to the server. Sony can locate it. They understand where it came from. So as soon as, let's say, this person who's bought it decided, oh, that'd be fun, let's plug it in and see what happens, and we'll connect the Ethernet cable to it, it's over. Sony's probably going to push something that just bans it completely. I don't know if they're able to remote brick it or do something else to it, but I guess technically if somebody bought this for a collection and they don't have any aspirations to develop anything, they just want to have that up on a shelf, then I guess it really doesn't matter at that point. I mean, the person who sold it, the studio, whoever, that got over 6,000 euros apparently for it, they probably won't get in trouble for it, because then it's like Sony would never be able to call to it if it's never plugged. I don't know. The whole thing just seems kind of strange. I mean, it's funny, and that's the big part of the story, is trying to dress it up as a pizza station that well, can apparently develop PS5 games, provided Sony doesn't try to brick it first. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the Famitsu sales charts. This, of course, will give us an idea as to how Luigi's Mansion 2 HD did in its debut week. Well, debut couple of days, but we can see this is posted up over on Install-Base Forum, where we have Luigi's Mansion 2 HD at the top, 88,425 copies. And if you compare it to Dark Moon, of course, this was back on the 3DS, it did like 30% of that. Actually, a little more than that, I guess, but roughly 30%. So not great necessarily compared to that, but you also have to remember this is just a re-release, I mean, a remaster, yes, but they didn't really do a ton to it, and this is a game that I'm sure many people have already bought, like on the 3DS, who would have been interested in this one. And then there's also the idea of it being sold digitally that would cut into the physical sales, but really, for me, looking at this, if you take a look at Luigi's Mansion when that came out on the 3DS in 2018, that was less than 30,000 copies. So this is actually not bad, all things considered, and the fact that it probably didn't cost Nintendo much at all to do this port. Not that it was nothing, but it's still, for what they did here, it wasn't some crazy $100 million project to get it done. So I'm sure Nintendo, looking at this, is pretty happy with how it started out. Then right below Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, we do have Animal Crossing New Horizons, which you can kind of see where the sales charts are at this point, if that's number 2 with just under 9,000 copies. So not exactly a ton of games flying off shelves right now in the summertime. Then we have Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, of course, at 3, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree Edition, Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, Minecraft on the Switch, Luigi Mansion 3, Momotaro Densetsu World, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and then Super Smash Bros. Ultimate to round out the top 10. Moving over to the hardware, we have the Nintendo Switch at the top, 46,265. That's actually up about 8,000 systems from the week prior. The Switch just keeps rolling along at this point. It's at 33,177,000. I do wonder if that 35 million mark is possible for the Switch by the end of this year. Again, I guess it depends on where Nintendo announces that next system and what kind of effect it has on sales here. And we have the PS5 right behind it, 27,505 systems. The Xbox Series, 1,592. The PS4 continues to push along here, 218 units sold. But really, a sales chart like this just shows us why Nintendo continues to push out a lot of these remasters and sort of remakes. They're taking advantage of the large install size on the Switch, and we even have like Donkey Kong Country Returns coming up to kick off 2025. I'm sure that'll do fairly well, even though they're having Forever Entertainment do it, and that's probably a cheap project, but this has kind of been Nintendo's strategy here to sort of close out the Switch's life, is release a lot of cheaper projects like these remasters and remakes to bridge the gap, we assume, to their next system when they'll announce the big 3D Mario, the big 3D Zelda, and other obviously big-time sellers they've had on the Switch in the more, we'll say, quote-unquote, AAA category. But yeah, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, doing pretty well out of the gate here in Japan, all things considered for what it is. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, are you currently subbed to Nintendo Switch Online? Okay, 25% are on the base tier. Wow, look, 33% are on the expansion pack. Nintendo's actually sold more expansion pack, the $50 a year tier, than the $20 basic tier. And then we just have 42% say, no, I'm not subbed to NSO. Now, I just see many people in the comments who said that they're using like the family plan where they have 8 people on one and it divided up and it's much cheaper that way. And it absolutely is. In fact, if you can do that, like you have friends, you guys all get on one account, you can trust somebody to pay it and money change hands that way and you spend $10 or something. Yeah, that's the way to go. Nintendo, they're leaving that up there as an option, so you might as well take advantage of it, and then it's a no-brainer for a lot of people, just based on the game library. Not even the, oh, you gotta pay to play online. It's like the number of games there that you have access to from Nintendo's back catalog is worth way more than the 10 or 15 bucks a year it would cost you at that point. But again, I am curious if going into next gen, Nintendo's gonna realize how much value is there, and that the prices, well, they need to go up. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Adrian, who says, can't wait for the day Nintendo sends a DMCA strike against AI. That is a big conversation right now, by the way, is who's responsible for the AI program that goes around and takes heavy inspiration from an entire portfolio of artwork someone has online and creates pieces that are very, very similar to it, or maybe it's in that certain drawing style, and a lot of questions around how that works. Or they go around, they train off of people's articles and stuff, and they come up with their own writing from it, and that's the thing. Do you go after the person who created the program, but then other people are using that program to do this? Do you go after them? You can't really go after the AI program itself. What happens if the AI becomes aware? Can you then bring AI to trial? That's a lot of uncertainty, we'll say, around all of that, because it's still so new and it's still stuff that people are just trying to wrap their minds around currently. So who knows what the future holds for copyright and AI, because right now it does feel like it's the Wild West. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. There's Nintendo's update for Switch Online. Let me know which tier you're sub to right now, and if you feel like that library of games they've been building feels worth the subscription fee. And then also about Sony attending Tokyo Game Show. I think they have some big plans here heading into September with not only software, but also maybe some hardware. Thanks guys for watching. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Newswave.